Novel, First Prep, David Copperfield, Chapter 15. The content of this chapter. The first point, David returned to England. The second point, David's feelings towards Agnes. The third and the last point, David's life with Agnes. After being abroad for 3 years, David returned to England. David began to write stories and sent them to Traddles, who arranged them for publication. While David was abroad, he started to write stories, and when he wrote any story, he sent it to his friend Traddles, who arranged all of the stories and he published them for David. So now David is a writer beside being a lawyer. His books began to sell well, and he became well thought of in literature. Okay, he became a good writer, well known by people. The third point, after 3 years abroad, he returned to England. So his friend Traddles helped him while he was abroad, not in England. Okay? Point number 2. David's feelings towards Agnes. We all know that David and Agnes were true friends since he was very young. Okay? And he kept no secrets. He always told her everything about his feelings, his life. During his time abroad, David's thoughts turned to Agnes. He started to think about Agnes. They wrote to each other regularly, and he began to realize that he loved her. He went to his aunt and was delighted means happy, that Pigotty was living with her as a housekeeper. Aunt Betsy and Pigotty, both of them lived together. Okay, Pigotty lived with her as her housekeeper. The third point, he asked questions about Agnes and Mr. Wakefield. He kept on speaking with his aunt, and while talking with her, he asked questions about Agnes and Mr. Wakefield. In the fourth point, they shared no secrets. They here for Agnes and David. They shared no secrets. David eventually asked her to marry him, and she accepted. Finally, David asked her to marry him, and she accepted the marriage. David's life with Agnes. On their wedding night, Agnes told her husband, David, that Dora had asked her to look after David and to marry him. Do you remember chapter 14? While we were explaining, I told you that Dora asked David to call Agnes for her, and they spoke alone. When they spoke together, Dora told Agnes to take care of David, and she also told her to marry him and to take care of him after her death. The second point, after they had been married about 10 years, David and Agnes received a visit from Mr. Pigott. Okay, all the way from Australia. Mr. Pigotti went to visit them after 10 years of being married, okay? And in his visit, he stayed with them for a while and told them about everyone's life in Australia. Mr. Micawber had become a magistrate, and Martha had married a young farmer. Mr. Bigotti himself had married Mrs. Gummidge. Before he returned to Australia, Mr. Bigotti travelled to Yarmouth to see the little stone in the churchyard, put there in the memory of Ham. He knew that Ham died, and he went to Yarmouth to put some flowers on his grave. Okay, the last point of David Copperfield is David and Agnes raised their children and lived happily together with Miss Betsy and Old Pigott. Okay, now David's life turned to be very happy with Agnes, who understood him and his needs, and she was a very wise woman, as I told you, who stood beside her husband and helped him to be a successful lawyer and writer. Now, the questions of this chapter. It is only one question, but it is divided into three parts. Write short notes about David Copperfield, Steerforth, Uriah Heep. Okay? It's the first time for you to deal with such a question. We call it in literature character tracing. What is the meaning of character tracing? It means that I want you to write everything you know about each character, not in details, briefly, okay? I want you to connect them together, to write the relationship of each character to the main character, who is David Copperfield. Okay? I want you to write your opinion on each character. Steer forth whether you liked or disliked the character, why, the ending of each character. Does he deserve to find or to meet that ending or not? Okay. Uh, then Uriah Heep, the same. I want you to relate him to David Copperfield and to write your opinion about him. Um, some of you will find excuse for Uriah. Some will hate the character. It's up to you. I just want you to analyze each character, okay? We call it in literature character tracing. Finally, thank you. I hope you enjoyed reading David Copperfield. Thank you.